Welcome. Today's session, we will cover acknowledgement of paternity in the program. As you know, the Office of Child Support Enforcement has a process called acknowledgement of paternity, as well as it has a contract. In today's session, what we're going to cover is the contract itself. We're going to talk about how the agency is able to enroll men in the support enforcement unit. Is it by coercion, inducement, or maybe the whole program is just simply misunderstood? We'll take a look at the contract. We'll look at the purpose of the contract, what type of contract it is. We feel it's a performance contract. We'll show you all the parties. In addition, we'll identify all the agents involved. On the other side, is it an invalid contract, which is the entire process is was built with fraud? And one of the definitions of fraud is it the entire contract that's fraudulent and therefore voidable, or is it a portion of a contract that's voidable? We will look at that today. Hello, my name is Chris, and I provide education on the Child Support Enforcement Program, and we break it down in simple steps so that you understand how it works, as well as to ensure that your due process rights is being recognized. On our channel, we provide legal education, both private and public. We review case laws, precedents, statutes, regulations. We also provide information on templates, summons, complaints, motions, and subpoenas. If you feel that your due process rights has been violated by the Child Support Enforcement Agency, we provide education on how you can remedy that situation in terms of due process rights. We will show you information on documentation you will need for your lawsuit, which includes burden of proof, self-help, education, drafting pleadings, causes of action, in order for you to prepare your presentation for the courts. So let's begin. A couple shows up at a hospital basically to have a baby, and this is the greatest time for them. It's one of the most exciting times. You have a newborn. It may not be your first, but nevertheless, it's all exciting. Now, after a few days going through labor, you're blessed with a boy or a girl, and everyone is happy. But then, during that 4 or 5 day process, the administrator of the hospital will approach the couple if they're unmarried and ask them to review what is called the Acknowledgement of Paternity Form. And they only present this information to unmarried couples. Married couples, it's assumed that paternity is already established. On the left is the regular form or the normal form that's given to all 50 states from the child support agency from the federal government. On the right is the New York State version of that same form. Now, all the forms across the states are very similar, so we will just work with the form on the left. So during this presentment of the paternity establishment, the hospital administrator will show a video to the couple or the new parents. The, the video is about 15 minutes long. Below, I've given you the link. There's a copy of it on YouTube, but every state has a version of this video. And on the right, it refers to the paternity agreement form, but notice it says that it has to be signed prior to checking out of the hospital. So this is a good time for us to review the contract itself and the process. So let's start. What are the responsibilities of the hospital? Well, the hospital is to administer the program to the new parent. That is, to child born of an unwed parents. In order to accomplish that, they would present written materials, both orally and through video and audio. I pointed to the video for New York as well as all the other states. And the staff is there to provide answers to certain questions. Another responsibility of the hospital is, in addition to the birth registry and the birth certificate, they also send a copy of this document to another designated entity. We feel that that designated entity is called the Child Support Enforcement. Now, all of this is found under the statute 45 CFR 303.5 called Establishment of Paternity. Now, let's look at the role of the mother. Now, the mother, and in this case, at this point, they call the father the putative father. This is the first time I'm introducing this word, but we will talk about that later. So for now, the mother is now being approached to ensure that she has a due process rights and that this is a voluntary acknowledgement form of, 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 of the parents. Also, she does not have to take a genetic testing unless she's part of what is called the state's Title 4A program. Now, the Title 4A program is also considered food stamp. And you may know that this acknowledgement of paternity is under Title 4D program, which is child support. Another part of the provision, Roman numeral 12, it talks about if the mother refuses to sign the acknowledgement form, it is not deemed a failure to cooperate with the process. So that is significant. The mother does not have to sign a voluntary acknowledgement form. Again, this is found under section 303.5. Let's look at the role of the father. So at this point, it's called the putative father. The definition of putative father is someone who's legally obligated to support the child, but is not necessarily the biological father of the child. So under this program, uh, the father, putative father, who signs this form are given certain rights. They establish paternity under state law. They can legally participate uh, with the child, as well as they can contest any sort of paternity issues that may arise. For example, if a little while after the child is born, another gentleman were to show up and say, I'm the father, well, this individual who signs this form, the putative father, can participate in that custody fight. Now, after the parents have reviewed the forms, reviewed the video, and their questions have answered from the hospital administration, they have 60 days from the date of signing the form in which to what is called rescind the acknowledgement. That is, if they don't agree with the provisions in the document or they would like the document to be destroyed, they don't want to participate, they have 60 days. After the 60 days, time limit has reached, the only issue before the enforcement program is if you want to, again, rescind the acknowledgement, you have to do that under what is called fraud, duress, or mistaken effect. And you have to do that before a court. Now, part of that responsibility is that the burden of proof must be on the parties who sign the form. As you know, the mother does not have to sign the form, but the father does. It also issues what is called, after the 60-day period is over, it establishes paternity as if it's the same force and effect as the order of paternity or filiation. We'll stop for a minute. Order of paternity and affiliation and filiation, well, it's the same thing as, but it's not. It's not. So what they're saying is, we're going to take your word for it that you are the biological father, but we are not going to provide proof for that. So, and we'll talk a little bit more later about this, but in this presentation, we won't expand on the order of paternity and order of filiation. Maybe at a later date, we will cover that topic. And finally, the putative father's name is now entered in what is called the registry, the putative father registry. Every state has one. I have a call to action later on in the presentation where we'll talk more in detail. So Now that the parties have signed the form, let's talk about the responsibility of the obligor. So now the father went from being a putative father to what is now an obligor. Now, an obligor under the child enforcement program is what we call someone who's responsible for the child support payment. That is, the agency can then establish a child support order and bypass the full judicial process. That is the same effect as if it's court. As you know, child support is an Article 1 under the Constitution. Judicial branch is Article 3 under the Constitution. Later at another time, we will do a webinar on the differences between Article 1 and Article 3 for those of you who don't know. But for now, this is the process. Also, the agency has the authority to take your state income tax refund in order to pay the child support. Another option is the acknowledgement of paternity gives this putative father the ability to use that document as evidence in court for admissibility reasons. Now, obviously, that is a non-conclusive or conclusive evidence of paternity, but in a custody fight, this document be used as evidence. Next, a default order could be written against the father. That is, we send you communications. If you do not respond within a specific time frame, we're allowed under our process to issue a default orders. In terms of the payments for child support, the father must secure payment. That is, this is one of the guarantee. And if you are late in any payments, the agency is allowed to contact the consumer report agencies and report your delinquent payment. Now, if there's any issues to be resolved under the child support program, the authority is to discuss these options before a support magistrate. Now, a support magistrate is a non-judicial officer. It could be performed by a judge or an attorney, but the function and practice is considered non-judicial. Again, because child support falls under Article 1, which is outside of the judicial process. Now, the provisions that covers the obligor father is found under Statute 45 CFR 302.7, which is different than 303.5. So now at this point, let's summarize what we now know. One, the putative father or the obligor, the individual who signed the acknowledgement form, after 60 days has agreed that the only way to remove this agreement or contract is on the basis of fraud or duress. Second, he also promptly guarantees and secure all payments to the agency. Next, he is also committed to liquidating all personal assets, investments, and retirement in order to support or provide a guarantee for these payments. Next, the judicial process. He agrees to an administrative and civil prosecution for enforcement and bypass the courts, which means he voluntarily gives up his due process rights. And finally, if all else fails, he agrees to what is called a civil warrant and an arrest. And if that cannot be resolved, he goes directly to jail for up to 1 year. So here's our call to action. If you are one of those gentlemen who signed that putative father registry, or you believe you may have signed it or not, you can always contact the putative father registry. I've given the address here for New York. It's in Rensselaer, New York. You can reach out to them and get a copy of the form that you've signed, if you sign the form. So now that I've given you the foundation of the acknowledgement form, I have a question for the audience who's listening here and or around. Is this a valid contract? Or is this an invalid contract under fraud? Well, at this point, I'll ask you to decide. Send us an email telling us what you think it is. I've given you key points to look at in each of the statutes, and you tell me, what do you think? As part of this webinar series, we have a secondary webinar, which we call the Acknowledgement of Paternity. For all the men who've signed these acknowledgement form, and also for all the men who have not signed this form, we have a follow-up webinar where we discuss this in more detail, as well as we provide a remedy in the event that you need to challenge the form itself. It can be attended by one-on-one or a group session. You can make a request via email, and it's open to everyone, married couples, unmarried couples, and singles. We also provide future webinars, such as child support program reimbursements, the role of your attorney, Rooker-Feldman, immunity, emotion to dismiss, and stay tuned for our next series of videos. At this point, we've come to the end of our presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you now have a better understanding of what the acknowledgement process is. And if you have additional questions or comments or subjects you'd like us to review, please let us know. In addition, we're asking for a small donation if you could help us so that we can bring more materials to you, the public. And in addition, please subscribe and ring the notification bell and subscribe to our website. This brings us to the end of this presentation. And as we stated, we do have a follow-up presentation that if you'd like to attend that webinar, please let us know. And thank you today. Goodbye.